Okay, now I'll see if anyone can see me. Something fishy happened with the StreamYard. So here I go again, coffee talk. Can anyone see or hear me? Because something funny happened with the connection. And so I don't know if I am live or not. Again, this is Coffee Talk at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube and at Prepper University on YouTube, as well as at Coffee Talk Chat on X, formerly known as Twitter, and fistfulofradio.com. I can be found Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. And there's Sven. Sven says I'm on now. Dubsy says 5x5. Legend says yes. Okay, Helter says they can see and hear me. Yeah, I was on, and StreamYard said I was connected, but there was no bar indicator. And so usually the indicator will be on there to let you know that you are maintaining a connection, and I did not see it. So I wanted to I reset it, and now I guess I'm here. So for the first minute or so, I was talking to myself. There you go. I also see Donna Beaver is here, reminding people thumbs up, like, and share. Please do if you don't mind. I'll take all the thumbs up I can get. Dragon is here. What else have we got? As I try to catch up, I got a little screwed up there. Urban Angst is there. Sorry for the inconvenience, people. Sven says it's a good thing Biden got Mexico to let humanitarian supplies into Gaza. Wait, what did he say? I don't know. What did he say? Gary Edwards is here. Doc Galt is here. Delo is here with no notification, he says. Again with that. No notifications. Don't you get tired of that? I don't know what the bell icon is for if nobody's going to get notified. What are you going to do? But yeah, here we are, live on the air. And of course, I read through as many of the comments as is plausible for those of you who are listening and not able to see what is going on, so you can try to keep up with the conversation. Dusty joining me in the background for those of you who can see. No other animals in the room currently. And All People is joining us. This is something I showed yesterday, and there's actually a follow-up story now. And you might remember this from Oakland, California, all the way from Oakland, California. Fox Business, masked California thief nabbed after being caught on video snatching dozens of iPhones from the Apple store. You recall this, don't you? I showed this video clip yesterday of a young man who, it turns out he's 22 years old, young man running through the Apple store, stealing all the display phones. Like, that's useful at all. There he goes. There's the clip again. The alarm is ringing. He's tearing he's ripping the cords, which is useless, because I'm thinking anyone who has an IQ above 50 realizes that once you walk out of that store, that phone is useless. And it can be tracked. And there's cameras outside. And he was followed with someone else with a cell phone who got his license number. There's so many things wrong with this whole video and that whole situation. It's ridiculous. Plus, he walks past a police cruiser out into the street. But, back into the article here. California man arrested on Wednesday night in connection with a theft from an Apple store in Berkeley, in which I thought it was Oakland. Or are they the same area? I'm not familiar with California's layout, in which he allegedly seen on video snatching display devices before walking past a police vehicle and walking to a getaway car. Emeryville Police Department detectives arrested 20-year-old Tyler Mims of Berkeley for his involvement in the theft and charged him with burglary, grand theft, and other crimes. On Monday, officers with the department were dispatched to the scene after a caller reported the crime and said the suspect fled with 50 iPhones with a total value of, are you sitting down, $49,230. So the phones are like $1,000 a piece. I got mine for free. Oh my God. A masked man, later alleged to be Mims, you know who it is, was wearing all black clothing and seen in the video going from table to table at 10:30 a.m. on February 5th ripping phones from their displays and placing them into his pockets. Well, no, he wasn't putting them in his pockets. He was wearing sweatpants, and he was just stuffing them down the front of his sweatpants and letting them fall into the legs. During the nearly 45-second video, the thief takes dozens of phones, which cost hundreds of dollars each. No, they cost apparently about $1,000 each. Witnesses stood by and watched because people are useless. And the person recording the video followed closely behind the individual as he exited the store and brushed against a police cruiser before getting into a black Hyundai. That person filming was the only useful person there. The video made rounds on social media, of course, and since January 19th, the department has responded to 4 grand thefts from the Apple store in town. So this is the 4th one. After the first incident, detectives began working with nearby agencies with similar thefts, identifying the thefts as organized retail crime. But it's an organized retail crime with product that's worthless. They can't use the phones. They can't sell the phones. And they inevitably always get caught. It doesn't make any sense. And the store had already been robbed 3 other times, and you had a cruiser sitting there, and he still gets away. The whole situation is absolutely pathetic. Unbelievable. Let me catch up some of the comments here. Urban says, what's the point of catching him? A corrupt activist judge will just release him back into the community. Yeah, it's reparations, man. All people said, why did the police do nothing? I don't know. And Nature Nerd says, do criminals have earplugs? Yeah, I guess. Helter says, nothing to worry about. Newsom will have him back on the street by morning, and he'll be doing the rounds of the Bleeding Heart talk show as a victim on Monday. And Nature Nerd says $2,000 iPhones. Some of them might be. It's 50 phones he got away with, apparently. He took every display phone. 50 phones with a value. What did they say the value was? It's up here. The charge is $49,230. So you round it off to about $1,000 each. And Doc says he thought they weren't prosecuting thieves out there. Well, I guess 50 grand is pushing the envelope, huh? Yeah. San Francisco. Sven says Satan looks up in disgust at the waste of humanity some have become. And all people said, what's the thief's name? Yeah, it says, because they did name him in here, Tyler Mims. Tyler Mims. Dragon says Apple will raise their prices to combat people constantly stealing in San Francisco. The normal consumers will ask why iPhones cost so much. Ultimately, that Apple store will close down. Eventually, they're going to have to. And Doc says, I see videos of people going into Walgreens all the time and taking whatever they want in California. A couple more here and I'll move on. Urban says the real story here is the cost of iPhones. Local families struggling to put food on the table, but undocumented invaders all have iPhones. They do. And people in really poor communities have iPhones or really expensive Androids. I told you, I've got an Android phone, but I mean, mine was free. I didn't pay for it. I just got a cheap phone. I don't care. The whatever cheap ones that don't suck too much, that come free with getting the service that costs as little as possible. You know, you go to Cricket or someplace and you get a cheap phone. That's all I care about. And D'Lo says he lives an hour from there. Good Lord. And Bingo's joining us here. Glad you could make it today. And Dupsy says this is the slow burn. Civil unrest will be nationwide soon. And Nature says, aren't those phones locked on a metal wire to the counter? Yeah, but you could pop that. It's only as strong as the hook it's connected to. The cable isn't going to snap, but you can pop it off of that screw because all it does is connect it to a power source, which is probably why the alarm was ringing. It probably started ringing the first phone that he pulled out, because that little plug that they connect to the back of it, usually it's like right there, because they're dummy phones. They don't really work like a normal phone would. And that's the signal that's the signal that gets sent. So it's connected to that cord, and it's a power source. And so you just snap it out. You don't have to be that strong. You don't have to be strong. But anyways, I thought I would share that because we talked about it yesterday. Here's something else that's come up in discussion that I find quite appalling. We're going to talk about lawmakers here. Fox News article. Democratic senator reveals people we care about most are undocumented Americans. I know you've heard this by now. And that was Senator Chris Murphy, from Connecticut, said on Wednesday that the Democratic Party's push for a path to citizenship in border legislation has failed the people they care about most in this country. Quote, undocumented Americans. If they're undocumented, they're not Americans, Jack. Okay? MSNBC host Chris Hayes asked Murphy about the border security bill and said rather than pushing for a path to citizenship in border legislation negotiations like the party has in the past, Democrats were using Ukraine funding, which they are. They're holding the border hostage and using it as leverage to try to get more money to throw at the Ukraine. Quote, well, I mean, Chris, that's been a failed play for 20 years. So you're right that this has been the Democratic strategy for 30 years, maybe, and it has failed to deliver for the people we care about most, the undocumented Americans that are in this country, Murphy said. This is also not 2013 any longer when we ran that play last. Back then, there was a couple hundred people showing up every day applying for asylum. Today, on some days, there are 8,000. Actually, between October and December, it was 3 million. That were counted. Where are we here? And the reality is that the bulk of this country does not think that that's right or sustainable and wants us to change the reality at the border, the Democratic senator added. They want you to change that by stopping people from pouring into the country, not by making them automatic citizens and letting them stay here. That's a failure system. It doesn't work, and it's getting worse. Again, in 2013, you had maybe 800 a day, a couple of hundred people a day. And we've gone from that to 8,000 a day in the last few years because you're allowing this to happen. You've tied the hands of Border Patrol, and you've tied the hands of the state governments that are on the border, preventing them from doing their jobs. That's why we're getting 8,000 people a day. It's not like this is something that has developed on its own. It was encouraged. And the American people know that. And you snub them. And then you use it as leverage to try to force an opportunity to throw damn near $70 billion more dollars at the Ukraine, while offering to let 1% of that border security and international payment package, I forget how it's worded exactly, to go through. It's a $118 billion package. Roughly 1% of it's going to the border if it was passed. Murphy said there was a temptation among Democrats to run the same play and they always run, but added they had a responsibility to adjust what the country wants because the play has not worked. The country doesn't want random people from all over the world, from some 75, 80 different countries every day pouring over our southern and northern border. Nobody wants that. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. Don't act like this is what people want. It's unbelievable. And Monkey has joined us. Said, did you hear that despite Joe Biden has given no reason to warrant an arrest, the interesting part is that Biden's own Department of Justice considers him bad with memory? Yeah, I saw that. I did see that they think that he's got a poor memory. Doc Galt says, you know what will happen now? Governor Abbott will send all the migrants to Connecticut till they're overflowing. Yeah, they should. And Urban says, Biden's too dumb to be charged for treason, only in America. Well, yeah, and that's, again, speculation, long time now, that it could all be an act to give plausible deniability if he was ever called up before Congress or called into court And they can say, well, oh, he's in cognitive decline. He can't stand trial. He can't go to court. He can't be a witness. You have to leave him alone because you can't bring somebody who's mentally ill into court. Sven says soon illegals will be cops in Illinois and New York. What could go wrong? Yeah, Illinois has floated that idea. And Nature Nerd says he votes for impeaching Mayorkas. Mayorkas is just a scapegoat. And Monkey says he thought it was said because of his age. It was a reason to not warrant it. But yet Trump is slammed with millions of things. Yes, he is. And yes, Helter, you're right. Undocumented Americans is an oxymoron. They're not Americans. They're not Americans if they're not documented. That is an oxymoron. It's just offensive that they're going to sit there and say that the undocumented migrants who pour into the country / illegal aliens are satisfying them, apparently, as is implied, are more important than American citizens, people whose tax money taken from them by hook or by crook pays your salary and funds all the stupid programs you put into law, whether they like it or not. And you have the nerve to sit there and say that those people are more of a priority than American citizens, than veterans, since money for Veterans Affairs is being taken away and services are being given to undocumented migrants over U.S. veterans who need care. Sven says improper handling is one crime that doesn't take intent into account unless you're a Democrat. Intent isn't in the elements of that law. And it's a shame how that's worked out. It's a shame how that worked out. That's offensive to hear a lawmaker sit there and say that. Oh, yeah, my constituents, the people I'm supposed to work for, the people I'm supposed to represent, oh, they don't matter. They don't matter. Our priority is undocumented illegals, helping them find a path to citizenship. And they don't want to be a citizen. They want a handout. They want to come here and hang out. They don't want to contribute. Not all of them. That's not fair, actually, because there are some who are legitimate. But unfortunately, most of them that are coming across now are not. They are not. As we shift around here, shifting into New York, more and more corruption exposed all the time. New York Post. What does New York Post say? New York Democrat accused of menacing also forced aid to hide C virus sickness. And you know what, again, if you've been watching long enough, you know why I still say C virus, because YouTube will hem me up. Threatened her with child services calls. And here we go. A politician in suburban New York recently accused of saying she'd slice a bitch colleague's throat is facing new claims that she also forced an aide to keep a C virus diagnosis secret. Tasha Diaz, the Yonkers City Council Democratic Majority Leader, is facing more bullying claims from former legislative worker who said Diaz even threatened to call Child Protective Services on her. Councilmember Diaz created an extremely toxic working environment during my tenure in Yonkers City Hall. Ex-legislative aide Janica Delgado wrote in a complaint filed with City Hall and obtained by the Post. Quote, her behavior included regular use of violent language and threats at myself and others, as well as berating for small issues that she perceived as poor performance. The new accusations come less than a week after fellow councilwoman Corazon Pineda Isaac filed a complaint over Diaz's menacing, which included claims the majority leader threatened to smack the taste out of her mouth. Delgado told the Post she was, quote, left in tears on multiple occasions and said she was forced to work despite being sick with the C virus. Is that her? Is that a picture of her? I'm guessing this is a picture of Delgado. I don't know who that's with her. I don't know who the guy is, but I'm assuming this is Delgado. A former staffer of Yonkers City Council member Tasha Diaz filed a complaint with City Hall on Tuesday. She was also allegedly ordered not to tell anyone at work about the fact that she was sick. She forbade me, quote, from telling anyone about my illness and prevented me from taking my legally mandated sick leave, she wrote in the complaint. Delgado told the police that Diaz tried to intimidate and threaten her motherhood after Child Protective Services were called when her son had some missed online schooling during the C virus. The former aide said she was unable to help her son learn online because she had to go to work in person. Diaz allegedly pushed to CPS and came to Delgado's defense, but later held the incident over her head, threatening to call CPS back and saying Delgado needed her. Yeah, I guess that is her. It says, it still doesn't say her name underneath in the bar there, but I'm assuming that this is Diaz. What is the name again? Tasha Diaz. Yes. I'm assuming that's Diaz. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. New York lawmakers threatening people, slap the taste out of your mouth. I'm gonna slash a bitch. Doc Galt says in Indiana, that's a chargeable offense. It's called intimidation. And Urban says, yes, everyone's having conniptions about Tucker and Putin, but when Barbara Walters interviewed Fidel Castro, she was hailed as a brave journalist. Yeah, I heard that. They're really trying to tear that apart. They're really trying to tear that whole interview service apart that Tucker had with Putin. I have not watched it yet, but I know that he's being mocked and insulted in the media. And hey, if you have an opportunity, may as well take it, right? Get his side of it, whether he tells the truth or not. It should prove interesting. That should prove interesting. But more corruption in New York. Is anyone surprised? And willing to bet that other person is out of a job, because that's what happens to whistleblowers. Speaking of which, this is another article that caught my attention, and this is from the Associated Press. CIA terminates whistleblower who prompted flood of sexual misconduct complaints. And T. Kane says, provoked? Yes, provoked. The CIA this week terminated a woman whose whistleblower account of being assaulted in a stairwell at the spy agency's headquarters prompted a flood of colleagues to come forward with their own complaints of sexual misconduct. The woman's attorney called the action a brazen retaliation. While the CIA said the accusation was, quote, factually inaccurate. Yeah, that's equivocating. That's like saying, yeah, it happened, but not exactly the way they said. It wouldn't comment further on the case and declined to explain why the 36-year-old did not make it through the agency's clandestine officer training program known as, quote, the farm, and unlike many of her classmates, was not hired into another job. To be clear, quote, the CIA does not tolerate sexual assault, sexual harassment, or whistleblower retaliation, CIA spokesman Tammy Thorpe told the Associated Press, adding the agency uses consistent processes to ensure the fair and equal treatment of every officer going through training. The woman's termination came less than 6 months after she filed a federal civil rights lawsuit alleging the CIA retaliated against her for reporting what she said was a 2022 stairwell assault in Langley, Virginia. Two law enforcement testifying about it in a closed congressional hearing. The lawsuit accused the agency of giving her harsher performance reviews and, quote, slut-shaming her by improperly releasing her personal information during the state prosecution last year of Ashkan Bayatpour, a then fellow CIA trainee, convicted of assaulting her with a scarf. And of course, why is this important? Why is this important? Something I talk about all the time. Been a whistleblower myself. This is what happens. And I wasn't even working for anyone as important as this. Every time you see any story about a whistleblower, they get harassed, they lose their job, they may never work in that profession again. But then we have to hear all the time about honesty and transparency from companies, from government. Oh, we strive to be as honest and transparent as possible. And what they really mean is we want you to be honest and transparent, but we're going to screw you over and we're going to cover up everything. And God forbid you tell anybody anything that you know about or heard about, and we'll ruin you. We will ruin you. It will cost you. It will cost you your job. It may cost you your career, or more, or worse. Monkey says YouTube didn't show the main comment. Basically, it was saying Tucker is what real journalists should be, risking it for an interview. I guess not. I don't know why. Well, ScrewTube messes around with the comments. Unfortunately, I can't control it. And Boogers has joined us, says they're late. That's okay. Glad you could make it. Doc says the CIA is nothing more than a group of mercenaries. And Urban says, so if the CIA is saying she sexually assaulted herself, kind of like Epstein suicided himself. Yeah, all they claim is that her statements are factually inaccurate, which any statement you give could be considered factually inaccurate because you might make a mistake. You might get the time right. Like, let's say I witnessed a car accident. I believe it happened at 2 p.m. and that's on the report. But it actually happened at 2:04, according to the street camera. Well, my statement was factually inaccurate. See how easy that is? So you can't trust that. And Dragon says, who would have thought that the agency that utilizes sex and espionage would have a sex problem? You think? And Gary says, government equals royalty. You can't yell rat on royalty. No. And that's the problem. You really want honesty and transparency. It's tit for tat, not do as I say, not as I do. But that's often what you get from companies, and that's often what you get from government, any government agency, as big as the CIA and all the way down to the story that we just read with Diaz. And the woman who reported her, she'll never work in that profession again. She won't. Never mind whether or not she still has her job. Any other political ambitions that she has, they're done. They're done because everybody be like, oh, yeah, she's the rat. We don't want her. That's how they do you. Yeah, and Urban emphasizes his shirt was green, but maybe it was blue, factually inaccurate. And it's that easy. It's that easy. And one more here and we'll move on. Helter says this isn't surprising that the CIA has zero oversight or accountability considering the shady stuff they did in the past. And God knows they still do. Who knows what the hell they do? Who knows for sure what the hell they actually do? And there's way too many agencies that really kind of technically have no oversight. CIA being one of them, FBI, really, who's really watching them and what will they do if they catch anything? The IRS operates with complete impunity. They're probably the scariest agency. They do whatever the hell they want. The BLM, Bureau of Land Management, where's their oversight? There's way too many of these agencies that are so mired in bureaucracy that they're practically untouchable. And that's scary. And Jet Mech says, what do you think about the Tucker Putin interview? I have not seen it yet. I have actually not seen it yet. I really haven't had the time. Curious about it though. And it is honest journalism for him to go over there and do that. And he's being mocked relentlessly in the media for going and having a conversation with Putin. And whether Putin tells the truth or not, at least he's doing it. At least he's doing it. No one else has the balls to go do it. Got to give it to him, you know. But I am curious to see what Putin has to say. Reality of it, though, honestly, even though I have to be careful because Google has warned us about what we say in regards to the Ukraine war. The truth of it is, what it really boils down to, we don't know what the hell's going on. We really don't. All we know is the spin that we're spoon-fed. And if you go against the grain on that and you deny any of that spin, you can get canceled on social media. They'll shut you down. So, which basically tells me that, yeah, there are things there that should be questioned. And T. Kane says scam war. Yep. And Monkey says war is full of unknowns. Of course. Of course. But we're going to bounce to Chicago. We're going to haven't talked about Chicago for a minute. This ought to be interesting. And JetMex says it's worth watching it. Yeah, I'm going to check it out. Maybe later on tonight when my wife gets home, we might take a look at that. I just haven't had a chance to really mess with it yet. And I didn't want to just take sound bites. You know what I mean? One more here from Doc Galt. If you think about it, what is the number one thing that the director of the FBI says when questioned? Quote, I really can't comment on that because it's part of an ongoing investigation. Yeah, the law says I don't have to tell you. Loving this. Chicago news. Chicago mayor roasted for October remark that his black wife is one factor keeping him from a border visit. This is resurfacing because it flew under the radar when he talked about this, and now it's popped back up. People remembered, hey, didn't Nitwit say this? And they're eating him up. And here you see Brandon Johnson, Mayor Brandon Johnson over here. And then we have the sign language person, which I always think is hilarious since we've had closed captioning on TV since the 80s. So it's kind of pointless to have a person there doing sign language when anybody who is deaf is just going to read the TV. This is what you call right here virtue signaling. Virtue signaling. Anyways. Oh, I know it. And Urban says, how come the sign language interpreter is white? That's racist. I guess they couldn't find a black one. I don't know. I don't know. And she might not be deaf. It's a whole can of worms. Again, I took sign language as my second language in college. I took 2 semesters of sign language and deaf culture. And they don't like us, okay? They don't like anybody. They're a whole different subculture that stays away from everyone else, which is why every time they pop up in commercials and stuff like that, I think it's hilarious. Like the Amazon commercials, they want to put a deaf person in every Amazon commercial. I'm like, yeah, sure. The one that kills me, you're not going to get a deaf person working in a factory. It's too dangerous. They're extremely prone to accidents because they can't hear, number one, and two, they have a problem of literally not paying attention. They're often hit by cars and things like that because they're not looking either. And more to the point, the Amazon commercial that really pisses me off is how in the Amazon commercial, the guy's saying that he loves Amazon so much, signing and talking with the muffled voice that you hear from deaf people occasionally, which normally they don't like to speak because they know they don't sound right. That he needed to work at Amazon because his last job he couldn't get good insurance. And if you're deaf, you get SSI, you get Social Security, you get everything. You don't even have to work. This you definitely don't need insurance. It's insulting. It's like Amazon is playing off the idea that they know everybody that's watching is completely ignorant of how all that works. Anyway, let's get to the article. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson mocked on social media by conservatives, not just by conservatives, by pretty much everybody, for a video from October that has resurfaced in which he says part of the reason he hadn't scheduled a trip to the Mexican border was that he had a, quote, black wife raising 3 black children. Well, you know, if your wife is black and you're black, I'm pretty positive your kids are going to be dark too. I mean, does he have to emphasize that? I mean, oh my God, unless they're adopted. Quote, I have a wife. I have children. They have schedules, Johnson said. And plus, we still have public safety that we have to address. We still have the unhoused. I hate that word. That we have to address. I still have a budget that I have to address. You've blown your budget, Johnson. You're done. And I'm doing all of that with a black wife raising 3 black children on the west side of the city of Chicago. I am going to the border as soon as possible. You ain't going. You ain't going. You're going to blame it on your wife and then bring up the fact that she's black and that somehow has something to do with it. You have congratulations. You have a black wife. So do I, Brandon Johnson. And I consider it a blessing because she's a sweetheart. I love her to death. Urban says it reminds me of a film called Children of a Lesser God. Yeah, Children of a Lesser God. That's right. Is that the one where the love affair with the girl and she wouldn't speak? They know they don't sound right, so they don't want to talk. Is really what it is. Helter says Johnson makes Lori Lightfoot look like the mayor of the century. DEI at its finest. Yeah, they went from the frying pan to the fire with this. As if you thought Lightfoot was bad, this guy's really blowing it. And Gary Edwards says everything liberal politicians say can be signed with one finger. There you go. Merv says, which medical experts did the court use to say that Joe Biden could not stand trial, or is it just more BS? I don't know. I haven't heard too much about that. But it's always my argument, the whole cognitive decline thing could be plausible deniability to avoid ever having to answer for anything. Number one Marvel fan says entire week has been horrible for the left. The entire last few years has been horrible for the left. It's just embarrassing. It's ridiculous that he would even say that. Why does he feel the need to emphasize that? I assume people who live in Chicago have seen images of his wife and they know what color the woman is. You need to point out that she's black. Oh, it's because my black wife did this and that, and I got these black children. What color are they supposed to be? What does that have to do with going to the border? Why does he have to go to the border? What business does the mayor of Chicago in Illinois have going to the border? What's he got to do with it? You know, I understand that as a sanctuary city, they're being overrun. This is like AOC when she went to the border. At least she went. I'll give her that. She went down there, she got her photo op, and she went home. All right? At least she followed through with the act. But if you're not on that state's border dealing with it, you have no business going there anyways, in my opinion. Deal with what's going on in Chicago. Stay your ass in Chicago and deal with that. Okay? Going to the border. What? If being a sanctuary city is that much of a disaster, overturn the status. Work with the governor to get a gubernatorial executive order to overthrow that mess and start from scratch. Start moving them around again. Send them somewhere else instead of begging for federal dollars and then saying you're going to go to the border and blaming your black wife because you can't go. Oh my God. Ooh-wee. Doc Galt says with Joe Biden, it's not trust the science, it's trust the science and get paid that gets paid the most. in reference to his cognitive abilities. And Gary Edwards says the mayor's idea of going to the border means a trip to Taco Bell. Well, then he's got to run to the border. Isn't that the old slogan? Run to the border. I really can't believe that he worded it like that. I mean, that's just I think he must have believed that he was going to get brownie points from his constituents for his blackness? Question mark, a big one. And it came out sounding ridiculous, which it is. If they've seen his wife, they know what color she is. You can assume his kids are all black unless he's adopted one, which I doubt. What does their being black have to do with anything? You're the mayor of Chicago. You're the mayor of Chicago. I'm sure you're getting paid well for it. I'm sure you're being very well paid for it. Actually, speaking of which, I want to see how much he gets paid. Brandon Johnson. How much does the mayor of Chicago make? Oh, excuse me. According to this, Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson earns the baseline of $85,000 salary each county board member receives. On top of that, Johnson, whose county district covers areas of the west side of Chicago, simultaneously collects a second full-time income of $103,000 from the Chicago's Teachers Union. So is that the mayor's salary? Is that what he's making as the mayor? Almost 200,000 from two different contracts. That's a little confusing. Let me see what this other one says. How about his net worth? There's nothing here about his net worth. I can't see anything. Maybe someone can find something that they have that they can post, because I don't have time to fish for it too much. And we'll go ahead and we'll get out of that so we can move on. There you go, Gary Edwards, Crook County. That's what they called it when I was there. When I lived in Illinois, it was Crook County. Everybody said that. And number one Marvel fan says, even after all this mess the mayors keep doing, I'll bet next election they'll still vote another injustice bad and they won't learn. That is very likely. That is very possible. And then Dragon says they voted for him like Beetlejuice before him, all about the grift, the green, and the gifts. Yeah, and one more here, and we'll move on. Nature Nerd says, where's our border czar, Kamala Harris, during the border crisis? I don't think her or Biden have ever been there. She did go to Texas, but she didn't go anywhere near the border, I believe. Is that correct? And we're going to jump back to New York. We're going to jump back to New York here. And we're going to talk about Jamal. You remember Jamal Bowman. Mr. Fire Marshal Bowman is what they ought to call him. You remember he's the one that interrupted the session by pulling the fire alarm and then pretending like it was an accident and got a slap on the wrist, and he has to write an apology letter like he's in third grade. I would have gotten 5 years for doing that. How about you? Maybe 3 with good behavior. He has to write a letter to the police chief saying he's really sorry and it'll never happen again. I will not write 100 times on the blackboard. I will not pull the fire alarm, Jamal, and everything will be good. And this is another Fox News article. Squad's Jamal Bowman honored radical black activist, convicted murderer on middle school's wall of honor. Now, this is surfaced recently because some video was found of a person that he showcased when he was the principal in the public school system. Okay, this has recently been discovered or resurfaced. This is why you can't do anything stupid. It'll come back to haunt you, especially in this day and age when everything gets filmed and recorded. Far left squad member Representative Jamal Bowman honored a radical black activist and convicted murderer during a special project at New York City's middle school while serving as its principal before being elected to Congress, according to YouTube video, which have been reviewed by Fox News Digital. A 2014 video centered on Cornerstone Academy for Social Action Middle School. Are you kidding? Is that really the name of the school? Cornerstone Academy for Social Action Middle School, or CASA, their then, quote, Wall of Action project. Is that really the name of the school? That's insane. That's ridiculous. You can't just call it Cornerstone Middle School. You can't do that. That title is absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, let me get back to the article before I go down another rabbit hole. Shows Bowman praising various historical Black and Latino figures being honored on the wall, including Assata Shakur, who was convicted in the 1973 killing of a New Jersey state trooper. Bowman referred to the people on the wall as, quote, tremendous, tremendous figures. Shakur, whose real name is Joanne Chemismard, was a member of the Black nationalist group Black Libertarian Army and was serving a life sentence for the fatal shooting of the officer before escaping from prison in 1979 with the help of Mutulu Shakur, another radical Black activist who was also praised by Bowman in the video. She fled to Cuba. And that's a picture of her. And there's Jamal. So he praised her and the guy who broke her out of prison and helped her to flee the country and hide in Cuba. Now, some of you probably have no idea who this is. I'm going to explain it. I'll explain it the best I can, okay? I'm going to explain it the best I can here from memory. Now, Shakur, Assata Shakur was part of the BLA, not the BLM, the BLA, the Black Liberation Army, which was a terrorist organization operating in the 70s. They were responsible for planting bombs, hijacking, bank robberies, kidnappings, ambushes, and shootouts. They were doing all this kind of stuff on American soil. All right. She was a member of this group. She was wanted for bank robbery. She was being chased by state troopers. They were stopped. There was a shootout. Some of the officers were injured. One was killed. She was shot, I think, in the arm. And, you look this stuff up. Somebody might know better than me. I'm just, I'm trying to remember. And arrested and convicted. She was charged with bank robbery, kidnapping, assault, a murder, so on and so forth. She got a life sentence. In 1979, this other guy that Bowman also praised apparently in this middle school. What are they teaching these kids? Broke her out of prison, made it to Cuba. She is alive and living in Cuba right now. And if I remember correctly, there is a $1 million bounty currently on her head. So if you need $1 million, she's wandering around in Cuba somewhere, living a happy, fulfilled life if you want to find her. Am I wrong? Somebody tell me. I think that's the rough edges of the story there. This is not someone who was persecuted by police. This is someone part of a domestic terrorist organization who robbed banks, killed people, kidnapped people, so on and so forth. Does not belong on a wall in a public school in the United States being praised by the principal, teaching this to these kids. You can't find decent Black people to put on the wall and talk about. There aren't Black people in the United States that have contributed greatly to society, to science, to the arts, or anything else. I tell you, there are. There are plenty. There are plenty. It's not that hard to find them. This is who you showcase, and it caught up with him now. But, okay, it caught up with him. Now what? Now what? It caught up with him. Is anybody going to do anything about it? Is anyone going to hold it over his head? Is he not going to be voted in again? Nature Nerd says Cuba is the worst option. Well, Cuba's not going to expedite anybody to the United States. Remember, they were an embargoed country. You couldn't trade to do anything with Cuba if you lived in the United States in the 70s, 80s, even 90s. It was a crime. No, you couldn't do any business with them. You couldn't go there, nothing. So it was a great place to hide out. And they're still protecting her. They're still protecting her because she could be expedited at any time. They know where she is. Somebody could pick up an easy $1 million. Monkey says she might be old by now, so it should be an easy $1 million. Yeah, if you can get her out of the country. Monkey says it's a single fall, like a single fall, and it's over. And Doc Galt says no accountability and that Cuba does not like the U.S. No, they don't. Excuse me. No, they do not. Most countries don't like the U.S. primarily because of policies of our government and other interference. But yeah, this is somebody who legitimately went to prison. Legitimately went to prison. And you're going to showcase her like she's some unsung hero? Way to go, Bowman. Way to go, Fire Marshal Bowman. Proud of you. Proud of you. And Marvel fan says it'll be interesting to see how our country will be in 20 years. Scary is more like it. I try to hire kids in early 20s and they last days, they quit or I fire them. It's becoming unreal. The schools here are horrible. You know, it's interesting because my where my wife works now, they bring in a lot of temps. They have to use a lot of temps. She works for the city. Okay, now the two of us used to work in mental health. She now works for the city, and they bring in temps, and it's a laborious job because it's like the water department. Okay, it's water and sewage, and the guys that they bring in, they have to get rid of them because they come in and they're dressed inappropriately, they're sloppy, they're dirty. These are young men, okay, from the temp agencies, 18, 19, 20 years old. They reek of marijuana or liquor. Can't find anybody. Can't find anybody legitimately to do the job. And I thought it was bad when I used to be the manager at Family Dollar and I couldn't get anybody to pass the drug test, which I had to do myself. They sent me a case full of these cups for them to pee in, and I'd have to check the cup. And I was lucky if 1 in 50 people passed it. I'd blow through those cups. They used to be pissed. Monkey says it's not looking good for Bowman. No, the guy's ridiculous. It's amazing these people get into these positions, and they're making decisions for taxpayers. Nature Nerd says these are evil people they were praising. You're right. Marvel fan says friends with kids in private school all come out normal and smart. And Marvel fan, I'll go back to my own college experience where the majority of the students struggled desperately, but at the top of the class, homeschooled and private schooled kids did phenomenally well. Most of the kids from the public schools, they could barely get through it. And this was years ago. I can imagine how bad it is now. And Doc Alt says, let me guess, pants hanging down past their ass. Yeah, or showing up. You're going to show up, and you might have to be digging trenches, and you show up in Crocs. In sweatpants that won't tie up. Seriously, it's pathetic. It's absolutely pathetic. And oh, excuse me. Unbelievable. And we'll run over one more one more article here. I thought this was interesting, and this is an international one. This is coming out of Europe. The Telegraph. The Telegraph. Who's here from Europe today? Anybody? I know there are people watching from Europe. Kemi Badenoch. I have evidence that gay young people are being told they're transmogrified. And you know what I mean by transmogrified? I hesitate to say the word. This is an interesting article, actually. Kemi Badenoch has told MPs that's members of parliament, that she has strong evidence that gay young people are being convinced that they are transmogrified instead. The Equalities Minister quoted experts who say that children likely to grow up to be same-sex attracted might be subjected by conversion practices which persuade them to change their gender. In a letter to the Commons Women and Equalities Select Committee, she revealed a former clinician at the NHS Tavistock Child Gender Identity Clinic. God, the fact that something like that even exists offends me. Has said that in agreeing to request to help children change gender, they were in fact making them straight. Another, wow, what a world. Another said that agreeing to help a homosexual child change gender was in effect conversion therapy for gay kids. Ms. Badenoch agreed to write to the committee to provide the evidence following an appearance before them last month. Her letter shows that the number of children in England going to the NHS NHS Gender Identity Development Service has soared from 250 in 2011 to 5,000 in 2021 and 22. Good God. She wrote, I committed to providing further details on the evidence that children likely to grow up to be gay or same-sex attracted might be subjected to conversion practices on the basis of gender identity rather than sexual orientation. Both prospective and retrospective studies have found a link between gender nonconformity in childhood and someone later coming out as gay. Wow. I don't even know what to say about all of that. That's heartbreaking. That's heartbreaking, especially being somebody who is a Bible believer, as it were. That's heartbreaking. So you have bad enough, you could make an argument for same-sex attracted people converting folks. Now you have another group trying to convert them. You could make an argument that there's some karma there, actually. Excuse me. Monkey says, from what I hear from the teachers in public schools, 7th graders are reading at a 3rd grade level. I'd be surprised if it's that good. I could quote things from my days in juvenile justice all day long about honor roll students, clients that I worked with that were graduating from high school that could barely read, couldn't do math, but they were getting 3.8 and 4.0 grade averages. You know, can't do basic addition and subtraction, can't count money, can barely read newspaper. And T. Kane says there's a screw the rich attitude in the supermarket I used to work at before they all grouped together to get me fired, purposely doing tasks slow and wrong to waste time on everything. And Max Mueller says, no wonder the suicide rate is through the roof. Yeah, you're confusing the hell out of these kids and superimposing all your own concepts, all of these crazy concepts about sexuality and gender and everything else on these kids who are extremely impressionable, very confused, introducing concepts to them that they're way too young to understand. There's no point in talking about sexuality to someone who has not achieved puberty yet. We all went through this. We know. You didn't even think about sex until you hit puberty. You didn't know what the hell it was. You didn't care. It's too much. It's all too much. And they're destroying these children. And that's what Max says, leave the kids alone. Yes, please do. And Doc says, that sounds like some MLK Ultra stuff. Today you're going to change your gender. Yeah. And if it was as easy as that, they would be able to change it back, which they can't. Those surgeries are permanent. You cannot reverse them. And even if you never get as far as surgery, the hormone therapies will have lifelong effects, even after you stop. You are permanently affected, permanently damaged. You can't fix it. You can't reverse it. You can't just flip-flop. Oh, I'm a girl today, I'm a boy tomorrow. It doesn't work. And T. Kane says 18 to 25-year-olds want to stay 16 forever, believe they are hard done by society. I'm in northeast coast of Australia. Yeah, like I said, there's so much that could be said about this. It's so much that could be, and one more here because we're past the hour. Although I was late because of a glitch. Urban says everything you need to know about prepubescent trans kids is what's happening to Jazz Jennings. It's terrible, and I can't look away. Yeah, that person's life has been destroyed. And that's why young people should not even have this option. Period. It used to be as an adult, you had to be an adult and you had to go to therapy for like years before they would even authorize considering changing you physically like that, to make sure that you knew what you were doing. And there's a lot that could be said about that. I don't have too much time for it, unfortunately. But we'll go ahead and start wrapping things up. Again, this is Coffee Talk. You are watching and or listening to Coffee Talk, and you can find me at Coffee Talk Live or at Prepper University on YouTube, as well as at Coffee Talk Chat on X, formerly known as Twitter. Thumbs up if you do not mind. It would be greatly appreciated. Find me on X if you are so inclined. I can put things there I can't put here. Of course, there's always Fistful of Radio, fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. Thanks again to everybody who was able to join us here today. Hope you got something out of the conversation. And with that, we will see you again on Monday.